All right. Oh, that's much better. Good evening, everyone. If you could take your seats, please. Thank you. We want to thank you all for coming to this special weekend. This is our first evening of this special weekend. If you saw the plan for tonight, tomorrow night, and Sunday. We want to give a special thank you to our sponsors. First of all, thank everybody for coming for dinner, but our sponsors, Debbie Oldman and Ira Levine, Marjorie and Gary Drucker, Isidor Juda, Stan Juda and Jerry Gnazer, Shirley Gilman and Burton Levine, Michelle and Rod Murphy, Hinda and Lauren Piscatelli, these people, the Rosenblatts, and Rabbi and Doreen Skolnick. I also, thank you. Okay, so just to let you know that this weekend has been in the planning for months now, and with the effort of several committees, when we set out to do something with programming, we wanted to involve different arms of the synagogue, and it was the most successful and wonderful group of people I think ever assembled. So the groups that are represented who helped us, we had programming, we had food and service, we had men's club, sisterhood, adult ed, board of ed, the Holocaust Torah committee, social action, and ritual. Hinda Piscatelli was a committee all by herself, and she's the Energizer's bunny, really. And my special thanks to her and to Lauren, who just have endless bundles of energy. The people on this committee, I just really want to thank. You're going to be hearing these thanks throughout the weekend, but I can't mention people enough. Lauren Piscatelli, Hinda Piscatelli, Ita Kaplan, Jonathan Engel, Deborah Wilkenfeld, Ellen Dworkin, Fran Parness, Ira Kleinfeld, Debbie Pines, who designed and made these beautiful centerpieces. If you take a look at them, somebody says like a Rorschach or ink blot test, you're not quite sure. If you're not sure what it is, if you take a look, it is from darkness to light, and the light is rising above everything else. The other people on the committee, Michelle Murphy, Joe Levine, Marjorie Drucker, Andrea Smith, Sherry Sosensky, Stephen Sosensky, and the Men's Club helpers, Greg Rosenblatt, David Bailey, who else am I missing? Brian Lakin, and I'm trying to see who else was helping. So Ben Fogel was on our committee. My daughter Sharon was on the committee, Melissa Hammer, and Mike Brooks. So this is a real group effort. I'm really impressed with everybody. And needless to say, always our spiritual guide, the rabbi. Thank you for all of your help and input with all of this. So I'm going to be introducing Ita in a minute, who's going to be introducing our speaker. But just so that you know what's going to happen after Izzy is done presenting tonight, we're going to be going into the sanctuary. And if some of you have already seen, there's a table lined up with loved ones who were lost in the Holocaust or survived the Holocaust but have since passed on. And we have LED lights that hopefully shine yellow. They did when I looked at them. You're invited to light them by the names. If you have not written a name, you do have it still before Shabbat. You can write a name and light a special light, and then we'll be starting our services. And I just would like to introduce Ita. And thank you all.
First of all, a big thank you to to Shira for organizing all of us. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce our speaker, Izzy, who I love dearly. Izzy lives at Tower 1 in New Haven. He's a member of the New Haven Holocaust Committee and a member of our temple, Beth Sholom, and president of the Towers Residents Association. Ex-president? Oh, once a president, you're always a president. Let me tell you. His daughter Jerry lives in Southington, and his son Stanley lives in Nashua, New Hampshire. He has 2 married grandsons, Eric and Michael, and 3 great-grandchildren, Sasha, Benjamin, and Mayrav. He has quite an impressive bio, but instead of reading it to you, I'm sure I'd rather hear it from the man himself. In appreciation of Izzy coming here tonight and speaking, a donation has been made to the towers in his name. Without further ado, please welcome our friend, Isidor Juda.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Closer. There you go. Let's try that. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you, Ita, and Shabbat Shalom. My name is Isidor, or short Izzy Juda. I was born in Austria in 1921. You figure out how old I am. I started school at the age of 6 and completed the required 8 years, which included 4 years of grammar school and 4 years of high school. Living in Vienna as a young Jewish boy was no problem. My parents came to Vienna, Austria in the early 1900s. They both came from very traditional Jewish homes in Poland and continued their traditional lifestyle in Vienna. I started studying for Baba Mitzvah with my parental grandfather, but our studies didn't last long because I liked to fool around with him more than I liked studying. So my dad decided I needed a private teacher. I was bar mitzvahed in 1934 at our synagogue in Vienna, Austria. The party was held at the neighbor's apartment. There was no caterers or catering halls. As a young boy, I loved music and sports. I sang in the synagogue choir, and I played the violin in the school orchestra. But my first love was playing soccer. I still have my first film bag, which was made by my father's youngest sister by him. I also still have my siddur, which I received from my synagogue in 1934. At that time, Austria had a Christian social democratic government, and there was anti-Semitism, but it was mostly in larger cities. Vienna was no exception. We as Jews were able to live a normal life until 1933-34, when the name of Adolf Hitler became known. In 1935, after completing my required schooling, I had to decide about any future education. My dream was to become a doctor to help other people, but there were two problems. First, being a Jew, and second, the financial problem. My parents could not afford to send me to medical school. Therefore, I decided to go to business college. Hitler was elected chancellor in Germany in January of 1933. Some of you will remember the Reichstag fire, which was set by a German but blamed on the Jews. In 1934, Austria had its first experience with Nazism, which was not legal at that time. Dressed as Austrian soldiers, Nazis entered the Austrian chancellery in Vienna and murdered the chancellor by the name of Adolphus. A puppet chancellor, Kurt Schuschnigg, was appointed, and suddenly we heard the word Anschluss, which means to become part of. In 1938, there were 1,935,000 people in Vienna, of which were 175,000 Jews. At the end of the war in 1945, there were 8,000 Jews left. of which 1 million children were murdered. The only reason they were murdered, they were only guilty of one thing, being Jewish. On March the 12th, 1938, I was on the way home from business school. I was going to my subway station. However, I was not able to cross one of the main streets in the city. Adolf Hitler was entering the city of Vienna. There were lines of people cheering the man whose goal it was to take over Austria and the rest of the world. As I got home, my mother was standing in the doorway crying and saying that Hitler is in Vienna. I said, "Yes, I know, I saw him. I was as far away from him as a wall from this room." Anschluss, new orders for Jews began. Jews could only go to Jewish doctors, hospitals, and shop at Jewish-owned stores if they had been vandalized and destroyed by the Nazis. And there were many other restrictions. When I returned to school a week later, I asked my teacher, "Why are these restrictions? What's happening here?" I was told to better not to ask. If I keep asking too many questions, I'd probably be sent to a so-called work camp. The following week, all Jewish students were told not to return to school, and unfortunately, that was the end of my business school education. More restrictions were ordered every day, and one started to take a risk to walk out into the street. One day, while on my way to visit my aunt, who lived about 4 blocks away, I heard screaming and yelling around a corner. The SA troop, which were the brown shirts, were rounding up all Jewish men and boys and herding them into a school building across from my aunt's house. Lucky me, I knew some ways and quickly returned home. My father was there, and as I came into the house crying, I asked things, "What's happening, Dad?" They were our neighbors for many years. He looked at me and he said, "I didn't know why." A few days later, when I got to my aunt's house, I heard yelling, clapping, and laughing again. I looked out and saw an SS officer. These were the black shirts, at the 4th floor window of the school building, which was called a holding pen, holding a little child by its legs and hitting it against the outside wall of the building. After the child was completely bloodied, he dropped it to the ground. That was part of their entertainment. 2 days later, my dad's younger sister came to our house crying that her husband had been arrested and taken away. As she was leaving, there was a knock on our door. We were all holding our breath. My dad opened the door, and there was a girl who was the neighbor of my mother's brother, telling us they all had been arrested. I lost 3 uncles and their entire family. Jewish boys and girls did their best to stay together and stay away from Hitler Youth, who were always looking for a fight. One day, one of my former non-Jewish school friends came by and turned to one of the girls and spit at her and called her a Jewish pig and other insults. I turned, punched him in the nose, and bloodied his face. He answered me, "I'll get you, Jew boy." After that incident, I knew I couldn't stay in Vienna much longer. My friend and neighbor Ada and I had many discussions about leaving, where we might go. He suggested to go to Hungary, but I disagreed. I told him we needed to be near Switzerland and then Italy in order to leave Europe. When I told Ada I was ready to go and asked him to go with me, he said he would not leave his parents. I never discussed leaving on my own with my parents, they would have never let me go alone. I knew my father had hidden some money, and he had relatives in the United States in Vineland, New Jersey. As things began to further deteriorate for Jews, we asked him for visas to come to the United States. To receive a visa took quite some time. The first visa that arrived was given to my father's older sister and her family. My parents, my sister, and I would have to wait. I knew that I couldn't wait much longer. One evening in August of 1938, I told my mother that I was going to the Jewish hospital the next morning to have them look at a cut on my hand. The next morning, before they awakened, I took some money that I knew my father had hidden and left my house with only the clothes on my back. I decided to go to Switzerland and from there to Italy and then try to get to the United States. On the way to the train, I bought a small suitcase, a shirt, and socks. At the train station, I inquired about a ticket price to Bregenz, which was the last town before the Swiss border on the western part of Austria. I checked my money and didn't have enough, so I bought a ticket to Salzburg. As I was about to board the train, two SS officers were checking tickets. They asked me where I was going, and I told them I was going to visit my grandmother in Salzburg. I had no grandmothers in Salzburg. They looked me over and finally said I could board the train. As the train started to leave the station, I said to myself, I'll never see my parents or my family again. I looked at some of the other passengers and realized that I was not the only one leaving. Excuse me. As the train passed the city of Graz, tears came to my eyes as I thought about my aunt and uncle and cousins that had disappeared from their home. When the train arrived in Salzburg, I knew I had to stay on the train. I had no ticket, but I took a chance. I was lucky and able to stay on the train to Bregenz. As I got off the train, I walked around and tried to inquire where I might cross into Switzerland. I was hungry by then, so I bought a bowl and a glass of milk. I was told there was a railroad bridge going into Switzerland and was told where it was. I also needed to know the train schedule and found out there were no trains during the night. There were very few Nazis to be seen, and people were very friendly. At nightfall, I started to cross the bridge on foot. Halfway across the bridge, I heard the word halt. I didn't stop. I continued to walk, and now I heard halt or I shoot. That time I stopped. Two SS men came up to me and told me to come with them. At the station, they asked me where the rest of the people in my group were. He looked at me, he says, how old are you? I says, I'm 16. I told him I was alone. One of them hit me in the face and says, don't lie to me, Jew boy. Again, I said I was alone. He hit me again and said, you're staying here overnight. I asked him for some water and he said, you little Jew boy got nothing. After spending the night in jail, the next morning they walked me to the train station. On the way, children and some adults would spit at me and yell, Jew boy, you're going to die. They bought me a ticket to Salzburg and told me I would have to get on a train back to Vienna. They also told me that if they caught me again, I know what would happen to me. As I got onto the train and looked at the other passengers, I realized that this train was never going to Salzburg. After traveling for about an hour, for some reason luck would have it, the train suddenly slowed down. I don't know why or what to this day. I looked where the conductor and the SS man was and didn't see them. I took a chance and jumped off the train. I had nothing to lose. I laid on the ground until the train left and got up and realized where I was. I had been in this part of Austria before. We used to go skiing there. I knew I had to get over the mountain. Over 2 to 3 hours of walking up the mountain, I came upon a farmer who was herding his cows. He asked me where I was going, and I told him to Switzerland. He says, "You're not going there tonight." He took me to his farmhouse, where his wife fed me and let me sleep in the barn that night. The next morning, he woke me very early, gave me breakfast, and said, "Now we'll go to the Swiss border." After a while, we stopped, and he told me to look to my right. When I saw the SS station before the Swiss border, I realized that he really helped me. Soon he pointed me in the right direction, and I would cross safely. As I came to the border, there were only signs, no barriers. I crossed and started to go down the mountain. After a while, I bumped into a Swiss gendarme who asked me what I was doing here. I told him I wanted to stay in Switzerland. He took me to the station, and the officer there told me I was now a political immigrant. I said I don't know anything about politics. The only thing I want to do is stay in Switzerland. He looked at me and said that I was in pretty bad physical condition, so I was taken to a hospital in St. Gallen. Until this time, my parents had no idea where I was. From there, I wrote a very carefully worded letter. From the hospital, I was taken to an immigration camp where I remained until I received my visa to come to the United States. In order to leave Switzerland, I needed a passport. I was able to obtain a German passport because, according to the Germans, I became a German citizen. As you can see, this passport also had a marking in there. So everybody knew I was Jewish. They put a red J in there. In May 1940, I received a visa to come to the United States. I was sent all the proper papers and all the tickets I needed to Italy, and I went to Italy, and from Genoa, I boarded the USS Manhattan for the United States. As I arrived in New York on May the 13th, 1940, I was expected to be greeted by my uncle. I had the best surprise in my life. My parents and my sister were there. They had received their visas in 1939. I had a job waiting for me in Vineland, New Jersey, where I immediately went to work. I only spoke 3 words in English that time: yes, no, and thank you. I started to try to read a newspaper and started to go to night school. As we sat around the table one evening, my mom and dad asked me how I escaped. After I told them, my dad said the day after I left, the janitor of our building and 2 SA men and my former friend, whom I had punched out, came to the door and asked where I was. My mother told him I went to the Jewish hospital. The 2 SA men told her they would find me and take care of me. Several days later, the janitor knocked on our door and asked my dad, "Where is Isidor's violin?" My dad told him he didn't know where it was. So the janitor says, "You want me to look for it?" With that, my dad handed him the violin. I was drafted in the U.S. Army in November 1942, but in order to go overseas, you had a choice. You could become a citizen before you had to be a citizen before you went overseas. I was made to sit there's my citizen paper here. In Missouri, Jefferson City, Missouri, I was made a citizen and sent overseas. I served in the Army in the South Pacific. I saw combat at Guadalcanal, Bougainville in the Philippines. I was wounded in the Philippines while we were taking Clark Field back from the Japanese in 1945. After many surgeries and months in different Army hospitals, I was discharged in November 1945. I received a Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Combat Infantry Badge, and a Presidential Citation. In 1946, I met and married Esther Weinstein and had 2 children. They're right here, Geraldine and Stan. In 1964, we moved from New Jersey to Waterbury, Connecticut. After Esther died, I moved to Franklin Pines, Florida, and married my second wife, Henriette. When she became ill and was moved to a nursing home in Brooklyn, I moved to the Towers in New Haven. As you were told, I'm a member of the New Haven Holocaust Committee. I'm a member of Temple Beth Sholom, and I was president of the Towers Resident Association. My daughter Jerry lives in Southington, and my son Stan lives in Nashua. I have 2 great grandsons, Eric and Tamar, and Michael and his wife, and 3 great grandchildren, Sasha, Benjamin, and Mirav. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my story.
I'll show you some of the pictures.
As you can see, I have some pictures which Jerry's going to show on in sailing.
This one, he was 4 years old with an
Please be
abacus.
seated. Sit down.
And this one actually is from his bar mitzvah. This one is on vacation. We also have, I will show you the passport. This is the bar mitzvah siddur.
From my synagogue, the siddur I got at the bar mitzvah.
And then these are prayer books from the army that he carried around with him in combat.
And I have military pictures of Dad
Right,
in the Army.
right. So it's interesting, the little prayer books.
Which is
The
interesting
Hebrew
because
one and the English one. I had both. They're kind of worn out. So-
Anybody have questions?
No question.
Thank you very much for.
Oh, hold it.
When you got to the States, were you the victim of anti-Semitism, or did people greet you warmly here in the States?
I'm sorry, I didn't get.
When you got to the States,
Yeah,
were you a victim of anti-Semitism, or did people welcome you?
I was welcome. I did not encounter any anti-Semitism once during my whole Army career. One time. Otherwise, I didn't have any problem at all.
Well, this is really worn out.
This is all
Yeah,
military
I
stuff.
don't
Yeah.
use that anymore.
No, well, this was a tefillin
I don't
bag.
think so.
Yeah.
When you were recruited into the army, was there any chance that they might have sent you to Germany?
Yeah, I was asked if I wanted to go back to Europe as an interpreter. And I says, well, I gave him one chance, I don't want to give him a second chance.
So many of us have had the privilege of hearing you do a Haftorah or other.
Once in a while.
Sorry?
Once in a while, I can do a Haftorah.
So, and I know you're under a lot of pressure from Rabbi Skolnick to do more. So what I want to know is, did you learn to read Haftorahs in
Yeah.
Europe or here?
Well, when I came to Waterbury, and I did my first Haftorah like I learned in Europe how to do a Haftorah, we had a cantor. I don't know if any, I knew Irving Pinsky, I don't know. Dale knew him. After I did the Haftorah, he looks at me, he says, "You did okay, but you're never going to do that again," he says to me. Because it was it had a Galiciana dialect, and it was done like I studied in Europe. I remember what he says. "You're never going to do that again," he says.
We knew him well.
Yes, you had to know him to understand.
Well, thank you very much for listening to me. Oh,
So you brought such important things from your childhood. Did your parents bring those to America when they
yeah, my
came?
father had that stuff.
Okay.
Because I said to him, how did you get it?
She said to me, "How did you get it?" My father brought that stuff out. Yeah.
We actually have, I used it from my oldest son, the pillow, or the pillow slip, the cover, for his pinata bend.
Right.
I used it for my oldest son.
She has that. Any more questions? Yes.
Have you been back to?
Yes, I was back 3 times. The first time I went back, the reason I wanted to go back, I wanted to go to the cemetery where my grandparents were buried. And I also had a cousin, the son from my aunt and uncle from Graz. He escaped to Switzerland, to Israel. And he went back to Austria, and I went to see him. And the second time, the Austrian government and the Jewish Federation of Vienna invited all survivors who wanted to come back for one more time, all expenses paid. And I went back that time. That was the last time I was there. Any more? Thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful weekend and a healthy Shabbos. You're next, I think.
Shira is coming back.
Shira's coming, okay. Did you see?
Him in the army.
Look at this one.
You don't look much different.
Got it?
Yes, I do. Want to thank Izzy for that inspirational and just amazing life story. I do have one other question. How many times have you spoken to groups?
Well, I speak to different